information. We have our panelists in Lagos, also in the nation's capital, Abuja, and from Borno State, Maiduguri, our studio. Let's begin with our guests here in Lagos. We would like to welcome Mr. Yomi Badejo Kusonya, lead partner, CMC Connect, former president, African Republic Relations Association. Thank you for joining us. Also, we have with him here in Lagos as well, Mr. Jake Ekpele, CEO, TAF Africa. Welcome.
Good evening, Nigerians.
And over in our Abuja studio is Mr. Atta Bakindo. He's the Executive Director, Kuka Center, Senior Fellow for International Religious Freedom in Conflict Regions. Thank you for joining us. Also, in the middle there, the lady, Ms. Idiat Hassan, Director, Center for Democracy and Development, and also we're joined by Professor Oke Ikechukwu, Strategic Management and Human Capital Development. A warm welcome to all of you there.
Indeed, also in our Maiduguri studios, we have Professor Khalifa Dikwa, Dean of the Borno Elders Forum, advocate of healing national reconciliation. Very strong voice there. Professor Dikwa, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Welcome to all of you. This is a topic that some would say very difficult to attend to, especially because there are more centrifugal forces now than it appeared that there had ever been in the nation's history before now. But again, there will be others who have said, look, we've traveled down this road so many times, and when the heat is taken out of the conversation, then you begin to see some level of a light. So let me begin from Idiat Hassan in our Abuja studio, the lady on the panel. Idiat, when last I spoke to you ahead of this election, you had mentioned that it would probably end up being like this. There'd be a lot of fracture, there'd be a lot of disappointment, especially on the part of those who felt they had been cheated. And then what would prove critical is what happened next between those who have been said to lose and those who have been said to win. So this doesn't come as a surprise. The question is, where do we go from here? What should happen now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ladi. Thank you very much, Ladi. I think it's, as a country, we should actually celebrate that these elections did not end violence as projected by many. There were beliefs that, oh, this will actually be the most violent elections that would ever have been conducted in the history of this country. And we did not encounter any form of post-election violence, irrespective of the fractured nature of the elections. Even all these gladiators headed to the court and not the street, which tells us that indeed democracy is actually maturing in this country and there is something to celebrate. Now, when it comes to how do we deal with this, I think first and important is that the judicial process is ongoing. And this is a very important process. Elections, it's what we call the electoral justice, where we expect that justice will actually be seen to be done and by every body, and we'll continue to watch that process. But it's also important that the business of governance is already ongoing, and what Nigerians will actually be looking at immediately is the inclusive nature of the next administration, and this falls under the mantle of the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. How inclusive will his administration be? Will it be that of just federal character, where we just bring people from each of the states? Or will it be one that will be inclusive of young people, persons living with disability, women, other vulnerable groups, that it brings joy and succor to the people? And it also rises above, like President Muhammadu Buhari did with the June 12 elections, to look at some of the salient challenges that is blighting this country, which actually includes the civil war, which occurred between 1967 to 1970. Yes, it was not the one who actually caused it, but an apology to see that justice is done. is seen to be done, might actually be a soothing nerve that can help calm tension in that part of the country, and one that calms tension across generations.
Let me ask Professor Ikechukwu there. What we have seen happen thus far is that all eyes have turned from the electoral process now to the judiciary. And everybody's talked about, look, justice must be done, justice must be seen to be done. But then the interpretation that everybody gives to justice also is now constituting a different kind of challenge. And that, some have said, is putting undue pressure on the judicial system and on the judicial officers. Some of those I've spoken to have pointed out that, look, the judicial officers are also Nigerians, and what you're asking them to do is to replace the Nigerian voter in deciding who won the election. Some of the things that have been said and done by many of the stakeholders puts unbridled pressure on them. So even though there's justice, there's the need for justice, what Idayat has called electoral justice, where do we draw the line between seeking justice and putting those who are supposed to dispense justice under undue pressure, so that at the end of the day, what they come out with is not necessarily justice?
Well, for me, the question of drawing a line doesn't actually arise because no line exists. The judiciary is a statutory arm of government that has a duty to perform. Now, aggrieved parties have a right to express opinions on what they expect from the judiciary. Now, if the opinion of aggrieved parties outside of the law and the judicial system is deemed to be pressure, I don't understand what kind of pressure that is. If, for instance, you're in the hospital for surgery, is appendectomy that's about to be carried out, and some of your relations are outside and they're complaining that, oh, this doctor should do this and the other one, it doesn't affect the diagnosis. So let's put a few facts straight on the table. Number one, if you go into a contest, it means you accept the rules of the contest. So if you go for an election, your expectation is that you'll either win or lose. Now, part of the tools, or what you find in the toolkit of the democratic enterprise, is the judicial process. So you go for elections, results are not satisfactory from your point of view, you move to the next level, which is statutory, which is mandatory, which is constitutional, that is the law. So you go there. You also don't tell the judiciary to finish it in 30 minutes. You look at the existing law. You have a law. You're supposed to go through this at the tribunal for 180 days. You have another 60 days at the Supreme Court, I think, if I have my facts right. So you can't jump forward and say, oh, you know, I've become impatient. Stop it. No. So what am I leading up to? There are opinions, there are concerns, there are even hysterical reactions to what is going on in the judiciary regarding the elections. It is the duty of the judiciary to conduct itself with dignity. The little I know of what should happen in a court is that the presiding justices will say, according to the evidence before me. Now, if somebody is shouting outside the hall, or people are wrestling at the stadium in Surulere, and from there they are making comments, should that distract somebody who has evidence before him? So I think also there has to be some greater discipline in the conversation regarding this matter, so that we don't begin to assume or pretend that what does not matter matters. Point. Every Nigerian has a point of view on the election. Point. Every Nigerian had to register to vote. Point. Every candidate knew he would either win or lose. Point. Every person in court today knows he will either win or lose. These are the facts on the table. Now, for judicial, what kind of pressure? Are they threatened? If they are threatened physically, that's a matter forbidden by the law. But I think what they are talking about is that there's a lot of social pressure in the kind of opinions being expressed in the social media among those who feel strongly about the outcome for and against. All of that must go on. But the whole point of leadership at any level, whether legislative, judicial, or executive, is that you settle for facts. You settle for defensible and justifiable positions. If you want to, you say you're the judiciary and you're panicking and trembling because people are expressing opinions instead of facing your job, leave that job, go somewhere. I mean, okay, you don't want to make people unhappy. Why not go into entertainment? You can actually be a cartoonist or maybe a basket mouth. I think that's, what do you call them now? Who get up and crack jokes. But if you're serious as a legal officer, and I say legal officer who understands that that's the last port of call for the Nigerian citizen, that's the only arm of government that can query the integrity, authenticity, and ontological status of any law coming from the National Assembly or any action coming out from the executive. And you're telling me you're under pressure because people are expressing opinions, go and find another line of work. It's not for children. So I think the thing is for us to also speak a little more strongly about this so that we don't begin to persuade ourselves that this is actually to be taken seriously. All that is going on in this matter is within the chambers. Now, the chambers are not a Joelegba, so bosses won't run over you and all of that. Yes, the social pressure, the social media commentary, the frustration of those who believe they should have had a certain result, you see, all of that constitutes the discipline of national political development in that aspects, after expressing that opinion, after all that excitement, you must sit down calmly and wait for the outcome and the decision of the judiciary. This is part of national development. But to say that the pressure is so much and so the judiciary is about to get distracted, I think we should dismiss that statement and discourage any judicial officer from embarrassing himself by saying such a thing in public, with all due respect.
Thank you, Prof. A different perspective there. But let's get your thoughts, Mr. Atta Bakindo. Do you agree? We've heard from Madam Hassan and her point of view on the issue in terms of the democracy when we're looking at the 2023 general elections. Has it divided us even more? Is it the reason why there is this unity? What's your take, Mr. Bakindo?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the last two speakers. Nigeria is not only physically divided into states and local governments and tribes and traditional chiefdoms and all that, but I think what we could add is the fact that it's also an unequal society, despite the fact that, you know, the spirit of democracy has thrived and a lot of progress as well has been made, especially some of the ingredients that can deepen democracy, as the Prof has said, in terms of having dignified legal, you know, actors and agents that can help deepen democracy. You look at the media, social media, access to independent, you know, outlets of news that people have access to information across the country. All that has improved in the spirit of democracy. But the country remains not only divided, but also a bit unequal. You look at access to education between North and South. You look at access to health care. If you look at access to privileges and even, you know, access to power, or those in power, so to say. So I think that the country quite remains a bit divided, a bit unequal. And as we are going through with the judicial process, it's important that those who are now governing and who have that, you know, are privileged to govern us, to come together to see how they can actually, you know, unite this country, particularly in terms of healing and reconciliation. First of all, it's difficult to reconcile individuals and communities if people, first of all, are not healed. The elections were conducted in a context that was not only divided, but all kinds of conflicts, violent conflicts, you know, were ongoing, either insurgency in the north, militancy, kidnapping, banditry, and people were already suffering, going through lots of traumas, either in IDP camps or others. So I think that individual and healing of communities must happen, even before you talk of reconciliation, you know, between people. So we appeal to those who are now, you know, handling the affairs of the country to please come together to see how they can provide the platforms and the opportunities for people to heal, but at the same time reconcile, so that the country, you know, can move forward. But we must accept that some appreciable progress has also been made, but we remain divided and very unequal.
Let's come to the Lagos studios here. Mr. Yomi Badijo Kusa and Mr. Pele, let me start with you. some of those that one has mentioned have said, look, this is really public relations. When you talk about national reconciliation and healing, it's good public relations. It's also about perception management. I don't want to sound simplistic, but is that what it really is?
Well, I would say so. I would agree. And to buttress that point, only last year, sometime mid last year, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations had a summit. We put together a summit where we went to the various zones of the Federation, the geographical zones, and then we ended up in Abuja. And, you know, coincidentally, 3 of your panelists were members of that national reconciliation, which we titled Rebooting Nigeria, and talking about how we could reorientate and we could revalue Nigeria, so to speak. Dr. Pere was there, and OK from Abuja was also there, and of course I'm there. The report is almost ready. It will be published perhaps in the next 1 month or so. And we had done this because we had seen the challenges that the nation had at that time leading up to the elections. Just like everybody said, we thought that, you know, can we get past these elections? And we felt that we needed to do something about it. We needed to do something about the issue of tribalism. We needed to do something about ethnicity. Definitely we needed to do something about religion. And let me put it like this. There are 2 things that are summary of how we can repair this country. It has to do with trust and values. The trust has completely broken down, which is why the Nigeria police will say the police is your friend, and you don't believe. It's just, truthfully, there's nowhere else for us to go, which is why the government will make a statement about something that we don't believe. I mean,
the trust in government institutions.
I mean, look, not even trust in government, trust amongst the various stakeholders. So Muslims don't trust Christians, Christians don't trust Muslims, Catholics don't trust Pentecostals, and Pentecostals don't trust Methodists. You know, it just goes down the line. And so that trust has broken down severely. We don't trust one another. We don't trust government. So when government makes a statement in the morning, you check if it's true.
Especially on social media.
Yeah, even without social media, I'm sure the president made a statement this morning and a lot of people were probably sniggering. So we don't trust government, we don't trust ourselves. And then the second thing is that our values have gone to the dogs. If you, there's a story which is making the round, and I believe it's true. We lost one of our titans in the banking industry, Shubomi Balogun, Otumba Shubomi Balogun, recently. I don't know if you've read the story, which says that when Dr. Alex Ekweme had to go to the East because of the Civil War, he left his property in his care. And when he came back, he was given every penny in terms of rent. My mom used to tell me that in those days, people who had to go back to the East because of the war, they left things like their bicycles. And if you're caught riding the bicycle, they made a public ridicule of you, saying that, you know, how can you ride the bicycle of Baba Chukura and so on and so forth. So those values have been completely eroded. Look, the people who are struggling for leadership in this country, everyone has one case or the other hanging on their necks. To the extent that somebody who was running for the leadership of one of the houses of National Assembly was facing a murder charge. And he actually went on television to say that it didn't matter that he was facing a murder charge. He had nothing to do with his speakership or running for office as a speaker. For me, if we're going to repair this country,
That's true.
These 2, the president really needs to rebuild the trust. some of the moves he's done, or he's taking, some of the decisions he's taking, is going in that direction. But he needs to be much more purposeful in rebuilding that trust among, because without trust, nothing can be done. The only reason a man is married to a woman is trust. The only reason, Millicent and Laddie, you are here at Channels is because you trust the system. The minute you begin to doubt the system, you're either not putting in your best or you even throw in the towel as a whole. And then we've got to revisit the values that bind us together. I think I'll stop there.
Dr. Pele.
Dr. Pele, I mean, taking it from there, trust and values, he's mentioned that. I mean, trust is a value, some would say. I mean, if you look at it elementarily. But if you take a look at the historical background that Jeff gave us, we have had this all along. It didn't start with this last election. But perhaps this last election was the proverbial camel or straw that broke the camel's back, depending on how you look at it. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting. I think when we talk about unity and trust and all that, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the factors that are responsible for where we are? Why did we get to where we are? I call that, to me, they are retroactive steps that we have taken. And the second aspect that I'll look at is what are the proactive steps that we can take. There is no doubt, and Laddie, you know, I sat here and I'm like, okay, what would I say would lead us to more disunity tomorrow? The steps that they take at the National Assembly, whoever emerges, if it's not the people's will, it will further divide us and create more polarization. The second is the appointment by the president. If the president do not give ears and his mind to inclusive governance, to shrinking the government, this government is too big and is swallowing us. It's like a big elephant that places his foot on our truth. And we need to take those proactive steps. What are those reactive measures that we've taken? Ethnicity, religious issues, the poverty that have not been addressed. You stand by the roadside and a politician who stole your money will drive past you and spill you with waters that is by the roadside. When are we going to sit back and take responsibility for our actions and find a proactive measure that will repair the mindset of Nigerians, the inequalities that is staring on our faces? You know, when are we going to address the issues that are lingering around religion, where people are using religion as a bait, where people think, take for instance, and I'll say this, I'm sure, Mr. President, you're looking at us, you're listening to us tonight. You have a Muslim ticket. These are elephant in the room. Many people will not discuss it. I'm going to discuss it. You have a Muslim ticket. You cannot sit there and watch them have another Muslim ticket or House members. You are going to further divide this country, period. I've always proposed that since we have a Muslim in the executive arm, why can't you push for us to have a Christian in the legislative arm? Somebody will look at me and say, well, it's not about religion. Religion plays a very important part in the unity of this country. Take it or leave it. And it must not be ignored. The poverty level, it is alarming. And you cannot be there, up there, and enjoying all the perks of life, and you expect the poor people who are looking for crumbs to be at peace with you. You cannot get peace when you create chaos. You cannot get peace when you don't look at issues around inclusivity. For too long, there have been non-participation of persons with disability in the cabinet. This is the right time, and if this president wants to make a mark, this is the right time to give the community of persons with disability at least one minister. I don't care whether it's Minister of State or the main minister. We need to sit at the Federal Executive Council and make decisions for the betterment of this country, period. The governors, you have a responsibility to appoint commissioners. We're tired of being called SAs. Give us just a little. The same tokenism that we're fighting is manifesting, and it should not be there. You cannot get true unity if you don't appease the marginalized.
Indeed.
Because they are the one that they use to fuel trouble. Indeed. If they are at peace with everybody, then we will have peace.
Let's find out from Professor Dikwa, who's with us in our Abuja studio. Prof, you've heard from our guests in Abuja and also in Lagos. What to you would you say would bring together Nigerians? Is it the shortfall of trust, the shortfall of values? What to you do you see unifying Nigeria? Professor Dikwa. All right, perhaps we'll come back to Professor Dikwa. But when you mentioned trust, the problem of trust values, my question was, who's to blame? How did we get here? Is it the leadership? Is it the people? Is it the socio-economic problems which we've had over the years?
Good, very good question. And I'm going to quote from the Bible because that's what I know. The Bible says that if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Our foundation was shaky from the beginning, and I think we had that in our introduction. We've been trying, it's like you've taken the chemist, I think, or the physicist would tell you that when you take glass, you take iron, you take wood, and you want to weld them together, there's a process. So you've got to reduce one state into another. So maybe reduce metal into liquid and so on and so forth. So we haven't done that. We haven't done that. And this trust has been trampled on for a long time. It is it is June 12. It is 12 2/3 of 19 is 12. If you remember in 1979, that is it. It is all the kind of things that we've done all over. It is so these things have come to now bite us because trust in itself is a fuel, and that's what keeps other nations going. So let's talk about how did June 12, the agitation for June 12 last so much? Because the people who are at the forefront of it, they had fuel to run. They had the likes of Radio Kudurat. They had, all kinds of things to fuel it. But the minute they run out of the fuel, then the vehicle stops. So we've been running on this trust for a while. So at a point in time when somebody tells you that you are going to jail, it was a big deal in Lagos that I know my parents. So because my mom will say something like, oh, that person, I don't mind that person. He's gone to prison before. And that completely disqualified you. I know somebody who was suspended from office. Suspended. And at the end of the day, he was exonerated. His life was never the same again. You know why? He became a recluse because he couldn't understand how he could face the society. The very thought that he was suspended from office meant that there was something wrong. But what do we have today? People blatantly steal things. People make statements that are divisive. Is that the word? Divisive, yeah. And you find some organizations even coming to back them up and saying what this person said makes sense. So what are we doing? We gradually ripped the trust quotient. We ripped it so we don't believe. Okay, we believe channels sometimes.
All the time.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Do you know?
Have you done this? And I'm sure that many of us are. You read a piece of news, and then if you are somebody who watches Have said, you turn to the next person. It actually happened to me 3 days ago when I heard that Emefiele had been suspended. It came on some news channel, and then I turned to the other person and said, have you read this? Is it true?
These are
Do you
the
know where
questions
I read it from? Channels TV. You understand me? Not because Channel doesn't tell the truth, but because we know people can go to the extent that they can fake Channel logo for a purpose.
That has happened several times.
Please, I know Channel tells the truth every time. So what I'm saying here is that unless we rebuild the trust, and that trust rebuilding will start from values. And part of the value is what you're talking about, sir, inclusiveness. We can't get from that.
As interesting as this is, I want to take a break. We're going to take a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. I will bring back our guests in the Abuja studio, so please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to the program, Democracy Day 2023. And before we took what turned out to be a fairly long commercial break, Dr. Pell, you were trying to make a point. I'm going to give you just 1 minute to make that point before I go back to the Abuja studios and ask the question about statesmen and how that should be driving this process. I will get to that, but I'll give you the minute.
Yeah, I think a lot has been said about trust, and it's true, trust and values. But we need to also understand and underscore what was responsible for the distrust. You know, take, for instance, an institution that I so loved, INEC, spoke stoutly, defended them, raised the trust consciousness of the electorate, promised heaven and earth, and instantly underperformed. And you saw trust eroded very fast. For one reason, because they have not come to realize the power of effective and honest communication. You were having problems with the IRF. Why didn't you tell us? That's all. And they decided to keep it, and that's where, and has put this whole election into jeopardy. So when people need to understand, and all of us here, that trust is earned, is not given.
To repair that trust, would an apology suffice?
Well, somehow, if you still tell us the reason, apologies are good, but apologies are not good enough when you don't give us the reason why you are apologizing, you know. And so trust can be rebuilt when honesty, integrity, and trustworthiness is presented before the people that you have violated their trust. It's like a woman. When you meet a woman and probably you did something that she didn't like, and you come honestly with good intention and render unreserved apologies, you guys have a heart of gold. You easily forgive and move on. Trust can be earned when trusted people present the facts in clear terms.
Let's go back to Abuja and ask our guests there, Idad Hassan, Reverend Father Atta Bakindo, and Professor Okechukwu. In no particular order, I'll ask the three of you to look at this point. The question has been asked that, look, when you talk about national reconciliation and national unity and growing the process, the people who should actually be doing this at various levels are those we refer to as statesmen, those who are far removed from the hurly-burly of the partisanship, those who can look at things and think in terms of the long term. But most importantly, as some of our guests have said, those who can rebuild the trust quotient because they themselves are trusted. Do we have those people? Are they missing? And if so, why are they not driving the process now? Because we are now looking at going forward. even as the judicial process continues in terms of the electoral process, the nation has to move forward, because whatever the judiciary comes out with, we're still going to need national reconciliation. We're still going to need national unity.
Okay. Oh,
Want to go first?
okay. I think that those processes are ongoing. For example, the National Peace Committee, conversations are happening. They may not be practically publicly done. And I think in rebuilding the trust to ensure healing for the nation to move forward, this can be done probably at individual level, ensuring that lessons are taught in schools and all that. But I think for me, two things must be done, and they must be done really very quickly. Number one, it is very important that those who are in charge of the affairs of this country really live up to their promises if they want to earn the trust of people and they want to really, win back the trust from people. So their political promises, campaign promises, looking at the level of poverty that Jake mentioned, people are really dispossessed. People are angry. And not only that, because over time, there are accumulated grievances that have not been addressed. And people are still expecting that these things should be addressed. So if you want to win back the trust of the people, that has to be done. And it could be done by those key stakeholders that have the convening power, but also including the government. The second thing that should be done very quickly is that the government must support in ending the culture of impunity. I know it's very difficult if you are a leader and you emerge through a process that is compromised. Then you have a moral burden in ensuring that the law is obeyed. But the level of impunity in this country is staggering. It's even shocking. And I'll give a very simple example. In 2012, I visited Singapore, and the house I was living, just outside the house, 2 cars had an accident, and the police came and investigated and discovered that the government was supposed to mount a traffic light in that particular spot. That was not done. So the policemen took the government to court to compensate the 2 drivers. But if you bring it back to Nigeria, I was in front of the Hilton, and the traffic light stopped me, red, and I stopped. And a rickety taxi came and hit my car. And the security personnel that were there approached me and said, "Oga, you look well fed. Forgive this poor man. Forgive this poor man, because where will he get the money to fix his taxi?" So the point I'm making is that the culture of impunity in this country is staggering. People do things and go free, from the level of the leadership right down to common people. And if that continues, then it becomes very difficult for people to trust the system, for the system to develop and to grow. So I think for me, for political leaders to live up to their political promises in providing the basic needs of people and ensuring that people are able to live a very decent and civil life. But at the same time, ensuring the rule of law will be very important, for healing and for this nation to reconcile going forward.
Professor Okechukwu, what do you think?
Oh, well, I was thinking the lady should go, so we don't seem to be oppressing her here. No. I don't know what you think.
That's not possible.
Well, she started the conversation, so I think she will pardon you for being the one who goes this time.
Okay, fine. Well, I'll just touch on 2 things. You spoke of statesmanship, and then you spoke of values. It's possible to be in public office and be a statesman. It's possible to be in public office, leave public office, and you join the committee of elder statesmen without being either an elder or a statesman, because you're still a parochial person. Now, the whole matter of statesmanship, sometimes it carries the mistaken assumption that a statesman has no personal or group interest, that is neutral, like something that fell from the moon. No. He is a man within a state. All his actions, the policies he supports, the ideas he defends are such that will create a stable state in which himself and others will be well taken care of. So he has a personal interest. He has a wife, he has children, he has his land, he has his farm. But he will not use his position as a public administrator to drive those personal interests. That's what makes him or her a statesperson, a statesman. So that we don't walk away with the idea that there are some people who are not engaged in public affairs, who are very pure, and unlike others who are contaminated and who are then the statesmen. If they are so pure, they should live here, go to heaven. That's where angels are, so that we sort ourselves out here. But for as long as they're here, the whole point of being a statesman is to mature so well that you can overlook what will interest you because it will affect others badly. So I thought I should make that point.
Right.
And having made that point, for the current government, it's possible for the president to be statesmanly. If you look at his record as governor of Lagos State, quite frankly, nobody knew he was a Muslim. And I was in Lagos. I thought I was involved in the June 12 elections as a presiding officer. I was teaching in Unilag at that time. Anybody in Lagos who said he knew Bola Tinubu was a Muslim, not people like me, I had no idea, quite frankly. And if you look at the kind of cabinet he ran, so he can actually carry on as a statesman. First of all, by the kind of appointments he makes. The geographical spread, but more importantly, the record of competence for people who can perform, the sense of equity he creates, how the kind of policies he drives, and all of that, and how much of the existing impunity he's able to pull down. Now, if people begin to see they can trust this man, one, at the level of the quality of personnel working with him, two, at the sense of inclusivity he has created by the appointment, three, by the kind of policies that are coming out, and four, by seeing that he's actually scaling down all the expenses that are affecting the nation badly, you see that trust. They will see, oh, he's a statesman, he's not a Yoruba man, he's not a Muslim. So I thought I should place that on the table and then come to the matter of trust. Trust is earned, like Jake, my friend, said. You see, but the whole matter of trust, a good deal of the time, and we've evolved a wrong political culture where dishonesty has become a very well-nourished industry. I come around, I do something that's totally of no value to anybody, but I've given money to the big men. We have a rally in the town, and everybody praises me, and I enter my SUV and move away again in a scale of dust. That will not build trust. Trust, and Yomi mentioned it, it's so total and it's so complete. And I raise issues so that we see them at the micro level, so we stop looking at Abuja and Buhari and Tinubu. If you go to most Nigerian villages today, assuming you left those villages in 1970, and you come back there today, you're likely to find the same village paths. You will not miss your way. But what you find is that there are very many new buildings, mansions in some of them, and fantastic mansions, but poverty still prevails. So you have a community where, because I've held public office, I'm now living at a level nobody can come to my house without being cleared by the policemen. The poverty prevails. They look at me as lucky because I've stolen and gotten free. And so what do you find? There is the mention and recognition of my visibility and importance in inverted commas, but distrust of me as a person from the angle of integrity. And you mentioned that when you spoke about people who will be embarrassed. You see, we have a political, economic, religious, and evil traditional elite that can no longer be embarrassed. When I speak of being embarrassed, I'm a governor. I've read a budget for this year. I read for last year. All the issues on the budget are unaddressed. Poverty has increased. The roads are not fixed. I've gone to commission a borehole where my predecessor commissioned a borehole last year. So you find a continuous and convoluted chain of unshameable, highly visible individuals, and they are setting the wrong template. That's why when the last speaker was talking about the youth, leaders of tomorrow, you should first of all admit that tomorrow is in trouble. You should first admit that the youth has the wrong mentors. Many of them are looking for whom to be a seto. You carry a bag and say, it has no schedule. You have no skill whatsoever. You can't treat a file. You can assess a document based on the financial outlay. But you're hoping your boss will help you become head of a parastatal or a commissioner.
Professor Okechukwu, I have to interject because now we're completely running out of time. And I still have to give Idad Hassan the final say on this segment.
If you don't give her, I'll carry a placard.
Idad Hassan, as we wrap up this segment, perhaps you can encapsulate, because I know that the new leaders are listening, those who are disgruntled are listening as well. And therefore, what in your view is what you would describe as the first quick win that needs to be put in place now that begins to give people the impression that, yeah, okay, maybe it's time, maybe we can take a look at this and then build on that subsequently?
Okay, so before I get to that, I also think that information is power, and we should be careful the way we frame information. Jake actually spoke to the issue of INEC not speaking, and moving to the future is the way we communicate that actually matters. A statement was issued, but maybe it would have been better with a press conference to actually tell Nigeria what happened on that night of the elections. So that's a correction. But really, Nigeria needs patriots, not just statesmen. And we are all in this together, really, because we are united as one. There is an Idayat Hassan because she is a Nigerian. That is it. So one, we all need to be extremely patriotic, even to our country, not just our country being patriotic to us. But we actually need the inclusive government as something that is extremely important. The government, the new government has already hit the ground running, but Nigerians need to see that this will continue for 1 month, not just a 2 week stint, that it will run for the next 4 years, and it will translate to the delivery of public goods and services. Trust is earned. It is not given, really. And national unity is actually key. He who has emerged must be magnanimous in victory. At every point in time, they cannot walk on hearts with conceit. This is no longer a winner-take-all. And tomorrow will also be extremely indicative. What happens at the election of the National Assembly tomorrow will go a long way in actually assuaging the fears of Nigerians, giving them hope in terms of what is actually expected and what we also even expect as analysts, because now you cannot take the opposition for granted because they are now not an emboldened minority. They are a majority themselves in the House of Representatives. But what is important for Nigerians will be the delivery of public goods and services that makes their life better, that reduces the inequality which they currently face, and the end to impunity, which erodes all form of trust that we have in the country. They believe that, oh, there is no rule of law. Today you can slap somebody and you can get away with it. A new power has emerged, and the system of doing things will actually have to adhere to the way it is done in one part of the country. Impunity must end, and we must fuel Nigerians, because we must have public goods and services being delivered to us as a right.
Indeed.
Not
we're at the stage. We're at the stage, Idayat Hassan, where I have to say thank you so very much for your time on the program today. The same for Atta Barkindo and Oke Kichuko, our guests in the Abuja studio, as well as Yomi Badijo Kusora here and Jacob Pelle. This conversation, very interesting. One would expect that those who are to take the key lessons from here and move forward on these twin themes will do the needful. Let's go straight to Ini John Mekwa with our audience. Ini, this is the time where we have some level of audience participation, isn't it?
Yes, this is the time. And I tell you, I have loads of questions, you know, from this conversation. No less. Getting the answers, I don't know. So I'm going to call just a few because of our time. And I'll plead with you once your name is called. Go straight to the question and do indicate who you would prefer to answer the question. So I'll start with Mr. Adeyi Ona Daniel. Please go straight to the question and do indicate who you prefer to answer your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Adeyi Ona Daniel. I'm a staff with the National Population Commission and the General Secretary, Albinism Association of Nigeria. Let me start my question with a quote. We all know this very famous American president, John F. Kennedy. And he says, think what you can do for your country and not what your country can do for you. We've been talking about how we need to recalibrate our unity. our economic development, our religious unity, and the likes. But from all these 3 hours or so discussion, I've come to realize that the summary of what we're talking is Nigeria needs to begin to unlearn some things that is happening, relearn some things we have learned before, and learn new things. The question, my public relations officer, is how? How do we unlearn, relearn, and learn new things to move this great country forward? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. A question there. I'll also take one question from Folashade Rojubokan. Please go straight and indicate who you would prefer.
How has change in population dynamics affected our democracy?
Who would you prefer?
Okay.
All right, seems you have your...
You seem to have you're on the hot spot.
Exactly.
Okay, so we got time for you to answer those 2 quick questions.
Okay. How do we really learn and unlearn? Do you know, I've never had any desire to work in government. I'm a private sector person, but there's only one post that will interest me, and that's the DG of the National Reorientation Agency. That is such a huge vehicle. I can run that office and I won't collect salary. Honestly.
It's on record.
Yeah, I can. You know why? Because that is the vehicle that can bring about the change that we're looking for. It is a vehicle that will give us the new values. It is a vehicle that Reverend Brackindo said that when you hit somebody's car, you've got to pay. The only reason why I drive carefully is because I understand that when I hit somebody, I will pay for it. But when somebody feels that I can do it and I will get away with it. Look, the problem in Nigeria is not corruption. The problem in Nigeria is impunity. I will do it and nobody will catch me. So if we get the orientation agency right, which goes back, including history in schools, including the way we run our businesses, including who becomes a mentor, just like we've said here, I tell you, that would turn around this nation. Secondly, because of time, how has demographic affected? We saw it in the last election. I don't want to, because if I say something, look, you know what the young people did? The young people carried a grudge and a grievance from 2020, and they carried it into 2023. They were like elephants, they didn't forget. And they said, oh, let me say something. When you look at a section of the population who are unhappy about something, and then you describe them as wailers, that doesn't work. And those people have now said that we will get, you know what, they didn't get it this time. It doesn't mean they can't get it next time. What it means is that they will go back, because really they are the ones that have the use of technology. So demographics has changed. Anybody that doesn't take the youth into consideration in the election, I just heard now that the president has signed the education.
The student loan bill.
What do you think he's doing?
It into law.
He's trying to reach out to...
Okay, so it goes back to the issue of PR. It's at that point that we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much, Wabio Yomi Badijo. So, that's the end of the segment. Incidentally, what he just made is a point that is worth noting, that the president has signed the student loan bill into law, which means that from the next academic session, students should be able to access
money,
finance to be able to pay for their tuition and other. The details will be revealed subsequently. Though I don't want anybody to quote me. I'm not a spokesman for government. But we'll take a break here at this point. We'll be right back with our next discussion. Just stay tuned with us.